Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Ganatam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Praptasya Kalyanam Gurunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasena Mahaprabhu ki Tananita Gita Vaditramadhyam Romanchakam Pasru Tarangavajo Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Niramarjanado Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Vande Guru Shri Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasado Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kritvaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Shiradikama Davayara Para Madhurya Lila Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Madhurya Lila Pratikshanasa Dhanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Ne kunjayuno Ratikeli Siddhai Jayari Bheri Jukti Apekshaniya Juno Ratikeli Siddhai Jayari Bheri Jukti Tatrati Daksha Ativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvindam Sakshadharitena Shamasta Shastri Ruktastatava Vyataiva Sadhavi Sakshadharitena Shastri Kintu Prabhurja Priya eva tasya Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasada Yasya Prasada Nagati Kutapi Dhyayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatri Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Dhyayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatri Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Vande Gurashi Charanara Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachata Deshatarine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hariyaraye Nama Krishna, Jadavaye Nama, Hariyaraye Jadavaye Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Moham, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Shri Radha, Nila Madhava Radha, Nila Madhava Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo, Nitai Gora Haribo, Haribo, Nitai Gora Pramanande, Haribo. Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Prabhupada Sutra Sarashishi Mari Divan Grace Abhachar Vina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki ISKCON Pratishta Vidhi Samstapakacharya Vaishnava Siromani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhar ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhattar Gunata Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ji ki jai. Nanta Kuru Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसरि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय. जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय. जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्रीमन गौरांग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावृणावतार की जय. गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय. जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय. Brihat Midanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopina Radha Kund Syama Kund Giriraj Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrajabhum Vrindavan Mathurdam ki jai. The Lordship Shri Radha Nilamadhava ki jai. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Eka Chakradam ki jai. Paramakaruna Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Shri Purushottama Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smasvodra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan ki jai. सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय. भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कृष्ण हरे भगवान की जय. जगंगा माय जमुना माय की जय. तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय. श्री मथुरा रानी की जय. समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय. निताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंदी. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Praladaladaine. Hiranyakashipo Rakshaha. Hiranyakashipo Rakshaha. Shilatankanakalaye.
Silatankanakalaye.
Ito Nasimha Parato Nasimha. Ito Nasimha Parato Nasimha. Yato yato yami tato Nasimha.
Jayato yato yami tato Nasimha.
Bahir Nasimha Rudaye Nasimha.
Bahir
Nasimha Rudaye Nasimha. Narasimha Madim Sharanam Prabhate.
Narasimha Madim
Sharanam Prabhate. Tavakara Kamalavare Akam Adhuta Singha. ललिता हिरण्यकशिपो कानुबिंगा केशवद्रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव कर कमलवरे अद्भुत सिंगार ललिता हिरण्यकशिपो दानुवृंगा केशवद्रीता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज
जय प्रहलाद महाराज
प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद
जय जय प्रभुपाद
प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
नित्य गौर हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की
जय
की जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की
जय श्री वृंदाई तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे सतवताय नमो नमः वृंदाई तुलसी भाई प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे सतवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय केशव सच्चा विष्णु भक्ति प्रारे सतवताय नमो नमः श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की
Namo
Krishna preyasi Nama Namaha
Tulasi Krishna preyasi Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna preyasi Nama Namaha
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Abhinashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Hey Abhilashi
Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi
Etabara Sharanalai Taravacha Purnahai
Chetamara Sharanala Haravancha Purna
Kripa Kori Karotare Vrindavanavasi
Tumi Kripa Kori Karatare Vrindavanavasi
Morahe Abhilash Vilas Kunja Deyavan
Moraya Vilas Vilas Kunye Diyava
Nayane Heribo Sada Yugala Ruparasi
Nayane Vasana Jugala Ruparasi
Eni Vedanadara Sakirarugata Kora
Eni Vedana Dhara Saki Ratakara
Sevadikara diye Kuro Nijadasi
Sevaya Dekara Diye Karani Jadasi
Dina Krishna Dase Kohiye Namora Hoy
Dina Krishna Das Kae Namara
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Basi
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Basi
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayena Vasi
Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade
Jane Kane Sapapane Brahma Kane Sa Tane Tane Prana Santi Pranachina Pade Pade
Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade
Jane Kane Sapapane Brahma Kane Sa Tane Tane Prana Santi Pranachina Pade Pade
Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Hatyadikani Cha तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
यानि कानि स पापानि ब्रह्मत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Tulsi Maharani
Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi
Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nittai Gaura Hari Bol
Vrinda Devi Tulsi Maharani ki
Jai Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namaha Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision I would always behold beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower carried damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me unmet servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna prays. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kyastakam Ki Jai. Cheto Darpana Majana Bhava Madhava Vidya Vadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pariparam Purnam Mamapi Durdhaiva Midvishamiya Janina Nuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amaninamanadina Kirtaniya Sada Hari Nadhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Bhajagari Sakamaye Mama Janmani Janmaneshwari Bhavata Bhaktir Ahaituke Tvai Ainandatanuja Kinkaram Pritamam Visame Bhavambudo Kripaya Tavapar Pankaja Stitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galarashrudharaya Vadinam Gadagadharudaya Gira Purakarinchitam Papukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisati Jugaitam Nimishena Chakrusha Pravusa Itam Sunya Itam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Asli Shabapataratam Pinashtumam Adarshanar Marmahatam Karotuva Jata Jata Vidadatulam Pato Matprana Tastu Saivana Para Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikshastakam Ki Namo Varanaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gaura Tvishena Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all signs of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of divorce from service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, somehow or other, I am falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the Lord's feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on end the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years and more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if sandals me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting, following the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1.
To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate their lives to propagating holy names of the Lord.
2.
To consider names of demigods like Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent names of Lord Vishnu.
3.
To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature in pursuance of the Vedic version.
5. To consider the
Glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord.
7. To
Commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord.
8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna as one of the
auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in the Vedas as fruitive activities of karma kanda.
9.
To instruct the faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
And 10.
To not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy names, and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to me to attempt while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa tarabhyascha, kripasindubhyevacha, patitanam pavanebhyo, vaishnavebhyo, namo namaha. Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurumani Vicharani Visesha Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 8 Verses 28 and 29. Praha Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Brahmane Bhagavat Proktam Brahma Kalpa Upagate. Praha, he said, Bhagavatam, the science of the personality of Godhead. Nama, of the name. Puranam, the supplement of the Vedas. Brahma Samhitam, just in pursuance of the Vedas. Brahmane, unto Lord Brahma. Bhagavat Proktam was spoken by the personality of Godhead. Brahma Kalpe, the millennium in which Brahma was first generated. Upagate, just in the beginning. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. He began to reply to the inquiries, he meaning Sukadeva Goswami, began to reply to the inquiries of Maharaj Parikshit by saying that the science of the personality of Godhead was spoken first by the Lord himself to Brahma when he was first born. Srimad Bhagavatam is the supplementary Vedic literature, and it is just in pursuance of the Vedas. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the personality of Godhead. The impersonalist always tries to misrepresent the personal feature of the Lord, not knowing the science of this great knowledge. And Srimad Bhagavatam is in pursuance of the Vedas and scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. To learn this science, one should take shelter of the representative of Sri Sukadeva and follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit without foolishly attempting to interpret, thereby committing a great offense at the feet of the Lord. The dangerous ways of interpretations by the non-devotee class of men have played havoc in understanding the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the careful student should be always alert in this matter if he at all wants to learn the science of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. He began to reply to the inquiries of Maharaj Parikshit by saying that the science of the personality of Godhead was spoken first by the Lord himself to Brahma when he was first born. Srimad Bhagavatam is the supplementary Vedic literature, and it is just in pursuance of the Vedas. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So yesterday it was clearly said that the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam are the two summum bonum, or greatest of all the Vedic literatures. And Prabhupada said, anyway, he said that they're the two most important literatures of the Vedas. Why? Because Bhagavad Gita is Krishna speaking about himself to Arjuna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is Sukadeva Goswami speaking about Krishna to Maharaj Parikshit. So both Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are the best literatures of all the Vedic literatures. And there's a huge amount of Vedic literatures, but if we just focus on these two, we will understand the real purpose of the Vedas. And that, of course, is explained by Krishna. Vedaischa sarvir aham eva vedya. That Krishna is to be known through all the Vedas. So when it says Bhagavatam is in pursuance of the Vedas, it says that in the verse and in the purport. It says Srimad Bhagavatam in the verse is the supplementary Vedic literature and is just in pursuance of the Vedas. And then in the purport he says, and Srimad Bhagavatam is in pursuance of the Vedas. So let's look that word up, pursuance, P-U-R-S-U-A-N-C-E. Yeah. So it seeks the knowledge of Krishna. Okay. And then it says, to learn the science of Krishna, one should take shelter of the representative of Sri Sukadeva Goswami and follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit, who, without foolishly attempting to interpret, thereby committing a great offense at the feet of the Lord. So we see how speculation is a great offense. Now, people like Einstein and other scientists, and Darwin also, they all said, speculation is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. That's the way we advance science, by speculating. But it is forbidden to do that in the Vedic tradition. Why? Because everything we're learning in the Srimad Bhagavatam has already been experimented and verified. We don't have to do any more research. We just have to be able to understand what's there. And that takes a long time to understand all the information in the Bhagavatam. It's not an overnight thing. But there is an overarching principle. If you know what the goal is, then you will not meander here and there with speculation, because if you know what the goal is, and the goal is to understand Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, no is equal to him, no is greater than him. So anything that deviates from that in the course of learning the knowledge would be rejected if you know what the goal is. If you don't know what the goal is, then you just go along, you just go with the flow. Anybody that gives a speculative interpretation, you just follow what they say and try and learn what they're teaching. But in order to save time and not be diverted from the goal of reading the Bhagavatam, we have to first understand what the goal is. So, yesterday I read from the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam. Right in the beginning, in the introduction, he says what the goal is to understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the first verse, and the invocation verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Right there again, it's stating the goal right in the beginning. And even in Bhagavad Gita, it says Ham Sarvasya Prabhava Matak Sarvam Pravartate. Right there, it's explaining the goal, that Krishna is the origin of everything. And somebody who knows this engages in devotional service of the Lord. So the whole purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita, is to lead people to the conclusion that I should engage in service of Krishna because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why should I waste my time going here and there when this is the goal? So I might not be perfectly knowledgeable, but if at least I know the goal, then I won't waste my time going in tangents that lead nowhere or lead to the opposite conclusion. So therefore, Krishna says, Bhaktya Tvananyaya Sakya Aham Evam Vidurijana Yatam Justam Chitatvena Praveshtam Cha Paramtapal. 1154, he says, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So it's very clear what is the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita, what is the purpose of the Vedas themselves. Also, in the 8th chapter, Krishna says to Arjuna, he says, Purusha sapara partha bhaktya labhyas tvananyaya yashyan takstani bhutani yena sarvam idam tatam. He says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading and everything is situated within him. So that's 8th chapter, 22nd verse. It says, Krishna is greater than all, and he's attainable by unalloyed devotion. And then 1855, it says, Bhaktya, says, Bhaktya mam abhijananti yavanyaschasmi tatvato tato mam tatvato gyatva vishitetat anantaram. He says, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So 3 times he says the same thing. When anything is repeated 3 times in Vedic literature, that means it's utmost importance. Utmost importance. So even the most neophyte person, if they just accept the fact that the goal of the whole Vedas, Vedic knowledge, is to engage in devotional service to please Lord Krishna through the instructions of the bona fide Guru, and there's no room for any speculation, they will make very quick spiritual advancement. Very, very quick spiritual advancement. Whereas others, you have to talk to them and show them this and show them that to convince them that they shouldn't speculate. But it's almost impossible to stop them from speculating because this is what they're taught in school. They're taught question everything. So you can even question God, the existence of God. So they think, well, that's an intellectual technique of understanding things. When you put everything under the scrutiny of your imperfect senses, and you begin to speculate, what if, one time a man said to Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, I have a question. He said, let's assume that God doesn't exist. And then Prabhupada, stop. He said, wait a minute, Prabhupada, I didn't ask my question. He says, your question is not logical. No, we do this all the time in the philosophy class. Let's assume that, stop. He said, this is not a logical question. Prabhupada said, it's like saying, let's assume I don't have a mother and father. But you do have a mother and father. You cannot deny it. So in the same way, let's assume that God doesn't exist. That's not a logical question. Obviously he exists. Obviously because of him, the world exists. Everything exists. So this is not a logical question. Don't ask it. It's foolish. You see, he made him stop. He wouldn't even let him ask the question. Because right away you could tell the whole premise of his inquiry was nonsense. How can you assume there's no God? Well, of course, amongst a bunch of idiots you can assume that, but not in front of Prabhupada, right? So, and therefore, now Sukadeva Goswami is going to begin to start answering in a systematic way all the different questions that were asked by Maharaj Parikshit in this 8th chapter of the 2nd canto. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the personality of Godhead. However, the impersonalists always try to misrepresent the personal feature of the Lord because they don't know the science of this great knowledge. And Srimad Bhagavatam is in pursuance of the Vedas. So in pursuance of the Vedas means it's seeking to understand what is it's not seeking, it is understanding what is the goal of the Vedas. And that is scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Okay. So, now let's go to text 29. Yad yat parikshid rishaba pandunam anuprichati anapurvyena tatsarvam akyatum upachakrame. Yat, whatsoever. Pariksit, the king. Rishaba, the best. Pandunam, in the dynasty of Pandu. Anuprichati, goes on inquiring. Anapurvyena, the beginning to the end. Tat, all those. Sarvam, fully. Akyatum, to describe. Upachakrame, he just prepared himself. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Parikshit asked many questions, some of them very curiously to know things as they are. But it is not necessary for the master to answer them in the order of the disciples' inquiries, one after the other. But Sukadeva Goswami, experienced teacher that he was, answered all the questions in a systematic way as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession, and he answered all of them without exception. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 2nd canto, 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Questions by King Parikshit. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. He also prepared himself to reply to all that King Parikshit had inquired from him. Maharaj Parikshit was the best in the dynasty of the Pandus, and thus he was able to ask the right questions from the right person. Okay, so this is the Vedic technique, questions and answers. We've gone over this before, and we're seeing it in practice here. No questions, no answers. So nobody makes any spiritual advancement. But when you ask questions and study things from all different angles and get the proper answers, then you learn the science of Krishna. And that's the whole purpose. And then it says here, however, but it is not necessary for the master to answer them in the order of the disciples' inquiries, one after the other. So how is Sukadeva Goswami, who is described here as an experienced teacher, how is he going to answer all the questions? In a systematic way as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession. So that's very important. It may be that Parikshit did not give it in the same chain did not ask the questions in the same sequence as it was originally spoken by Krishna to Brahma, or Brahma to Narada, or Narada to Vyasa. So he's going to answer all the questions, but in a systematic way, as they were received from the chain of disciplic succession. So always answer same questions that were asked and replied in a systematic way in the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita by the original authority, that's Krishna. Just like Bhagavad Gita has a sequence, and there's the first chapter that sets the issue. Arjuna's refusing to surrender to Krishna and follow his order, and they're in the middle of a battlefield, and right before the battle is going to start. It's a very stressful situation, and Arjuna throws down his bow and arrow. In the second chapter, Arjuna actually surrenders to Krishna, and then Krishna begins to instruct him to clear away his doubts. And the instruction begins with understanding the difference between the body and the soul. Without understanding that, there's no way anyone can make any spiritual advancement. So first of all, one has to explain that. So if you want to know how to preach to people that are not Krishna conscious, they may be atheists, they may be whatever, you always start with understanding the difference between the soul and the body. That's the way the spiritual knowledge begins. If they can understand that, and that could take a long time. Sometimes people never understand that because they're in a big web of illusion with many illusory ideas. So it's almost impossible for them to understand. But in the process of explaining, one gives prasadam and tulsi leaf and Ganges water and different things and opportunities for service. So that breaks down their in most cases, it breaks down their animosity toward genuine spiritual knowledge, and they become more amenable, more open to being instructed, because little by little, the devotees chip away at the false ego until it's completely destroyed, and then they realize, wait a minute, it's a whole world of knowledge that I was denying myself, and now I have an opportunity to learn it. So let me take this very seriously. Okay. So now there's a very important point I want to make for the rest of the class, and that is it's a very interesting explanation by Bhakti True Maharaj in his book, The Ocean of Mercy. Now, there's a lot of very good things in that book, but there's one thing that's extraordinarily important, and I'm going to read this. It says, often when senior devotees were gathered around Srila Prabhupada in his room, he would spontaneously instruct them about devotional service. Why devotional service? Because that's the goal of the Vedic knowledge, devotional service, right? So Prabhupada doesn't beat around the bush. He right away is always speaking about how to engage in pure devotional service. And that should be one of the questions we ask the Guru. How can I improve my service? You see? So, on one such occasion, when I was sitting with the group, Prabhupada said that an ideal preacher should have the proper understanding of the 6 branches of Vedic philosophy, that's also known as Sad Darshana. When one understands them properly, Prabhupada said or declared, one can understand that devotional service is the ultimate goal of the Vedas. Only then does one become eligible to impart the conclusion of Vedic wisdom. So only then is one eligible to speak about what is the actual goal of Vedic knowledge or Vedic wisdom. And that is devotional service through which one develops genuine love and affection for Krishna, and then one can be liberated because Krishna will guide him at that point, give that person knowledge and realization, not only knowledge, but realization, so that the rest of their life they can be engaged in Krishna's service with love and devotion. So Bhakti Chur Maharaj now says, I listened and a question flashed in my mind. Srila Prabhupada had mentioned in his books that 5 out of the 6 branches of Vedic philosophy were atheistic. So how could an understanding of those branches lead to the conclusion that devotional service to Krishna was the ultimate goal? Very good point. I still felt shy to ask questions in front of the others, so I remained silent. But at night, when I was alone with Srila Prabhupada, I remembered Tamal Krishna's advice. Okay, he doesn't say what the advice is, but he said earlier in his book what the advice is. That, whenever you're with Prabhupada, you should ask him some questions, if you want. I did that once. I was in the car, sitting right next to Prabhupada, and on the other side, we were all in the back seat, and the other side was one of the servants. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. I'm sitting right next to Prabhupada, and I was always carrying my Bhagavad Gita, the Macmillan abridged edition, and I had made notes of questions I had, hoping that one day I would get a chance to ask Srila Prabhupada. So I'm sitting right next to him. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, now there was a lot of noise going on outside because at that time, the drivers in France were like the drivers in India. They were always, as they say, horn awaz. Horn awaz, right? What does that mean? Blow your horn, right? So we were stuck in traffic in the Place de la Concorde. This is a big, beautiful place where people have to go in a big circle, and you could see the Champs-Élysées right up to the Arc of Triomphe on the right, and then you could see the big hospital that Napoleon built called what's the name of that? Les Invalides. Les Invalides means a place for injured soldiers, right? So when he was attacking Europe and then Russia, he built this gigantic, very, very nice hospital for injured soldiers on the Eastern Front of his conquering. And that hospital is still there. He did it. And one day Prabhupada said, Napoleon built this hospital? And we said, yes, Prabhupada. He said, hospital is still here. Where is Napoleon? Prabhupada was very funny like that. And he was right. He went to this big effort to build a permanent type of hospital, but what happened to him, right? He's not around anymore because he died. See, in the previous ages, especially like Satya Yuga, nobody built permanent buildings. They didn't want to waste their time having permanent buildings, like pyramids and big skyscrapers and things like that, because they don't want to waste their time from chanting and engaging in devotional service and so forth. So they would just live in simple huts, right? In fact, yesterday we were talking about this. We went to Arlington yesterday, start to work there to get the place into shape. And then one of the devotees said, well, we should build, we should do just like, what's this housing across the street, what's it called? Huh? Yeah, he said, like Palomino, we should build, these type of dwellings for the. I said, no, you can't do that. They will never give us permission to do that on farmland. I said, but on the other hand, because look at the way they're built, right? They have all this modern materials and things like that. And I said, but if you build Gobar huts, they wouldn't say anything, because first of all, there would not be any property taxes because it's not worth anything in their eyes, right? It's just a mud hut. So I said that's the way the sadhus lived before, and it's very good, because if it's made out of gobar and straw and some mud or clay, then in the winter it's warm, in summer it's cool. It's just natural because it's very insulated, and also and you have a thatched roof, right? So it's an ideal way for sadhus to live. Husband and wife can live. I mean, so many people live like that even today, right? And they can't charge property tax because it's not considered a house, right? It's a mud hut. But you see that advantage of going back to the original way of living. Anyway, so we see that in Satya Yuga, they didn't build these permanent buildings. They didn't need them. The weather was nice, and they always were living close to a river, and the rivers were clean. There were no industrial sludge in the rivers, right? And the weather was nice, and the devas cooperated with the people because they were all pious. And it was a very nice way to live. And that could come back again if we got serious about it. So I was saying to him, we're not going to build condos on the... First of all, you never get permission to do it on farmland. But you could build, gobar huts. And they don't have to be small. They could be a little bit bigger. And people can live in them as farm workers. That you get permission for. And they would never object to it because there's no consequences for the environment, because it's just mud huts, or gobar huts. So anyway, I also asked Prabhupada a question because I was sitting next to him. I said, Prabhupada, there's this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, that says, what is night for the master man is the time of awakening for the devotee, and what is night for the devotee is the time of awakening for the master man. I said, what does this mean? Well, because there was so much noise, all he heard was the time of awakening. And he said, 4 o'clock. Our devotees wake up 4 o'clock in the morning. So we realized, they must not have heard it properly. So then this one devotee was his servant. He said, no, Prabhupada, he's asking about this verse in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. And then Prabhupada started to laugh. He said, oh, he said, yes. He said, this verse means when the karmis see us dancing and chanting Sankirtan, they are laughing. And when we see the karmis all in distress, going to work in the morning or coming back from work and caught in the traffic, we are laughing. He said, you see, they are laughing and we are laughing, but our laugh is best. So that was a very interesting commentary on that verse, right? Because that verse, it's in the 50, what is it? It's verse number 69, 269. Ya nisa sarvabhutanam tasyam jagrati samyami. Yasyan jagrati bhutani sa nisa pasyato mune. What is night for all beings is a time of awakening for the self-controlled. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective stage. So this is a very actually profound verse, because we talk about, you have to regulate your eating and sleeping. So sleeping, you should take rest at the latest 10 o'clock, but obviously it's better that 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and wake up no later than 4 o'clock. But that's when people go out. 8, 9 o'clock, they go out to the nightclub, right? And around 4 o'clock, they come back home to go to sleep. You see that? So their lifestyle, like in New York is a city where there's two types of people: the people that live during the day and the people that live at night. They sleep all day and they come out, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And they go to the clubs and the different places for sense gratification, right? And I know I was a musician in New York. We didn't start our music till like 9 o'clock at night, and went on to 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And then by the time we get back to the apartment or whatever, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, where everybody else is starting to go to work and we're going to sleep. See? So, and so this verse says, there are two classes of intelligent men. One is intelligent in material activities for sense gratification, and the other is introspective and awake to the cultivation of self-realization. Activities of the introspective sage or thoughtful man are night for persons materially absorbed. Materialistic persons remain asleep in such a night due to their ignorance of self-realization. The introspective sage remains alert in the night of the materialistic men. The sage feels transcendental pleasure in the gradual advancement of spiritual culture, whereas the man in materialistic activities, being asleep to self-realization, dreams of varieties of sense enjoyment, of sense pleasure, feeling sometimes happy and sometimes distressed in a sleeping condition. The introspective man is always indifferent to materialistic happiness and distress. He goes on with his self-realization activities undisturbed by material reactions. So the way Prabhupada explained it was very witty. It says, they're laughing at us, we're laughing at them, but our laugh is best. So, or as they say in English, he who laughs best, laughs best. He who laughs last, laughs best. So sometimes there's controversies, and in the beginning it looks very like disaster for one side, But then they persevere, and eventually the antagonists lose. So he who laughs last, laughs best. Right. Okay, so now Bhakti Charu continues. He says, but at night when I was alone with Srila Prabhupada, I remembered Tamal Krishna's advice. So I gathered my courage and asked Srila Prabhupada, in your books you mentioned that 5 of the 6 branches of Sad Darshana are considered atheistic. And at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni points out to Srila Vyasa Deva that even the 6th branch, Vedanta, is tinged with impersonalism. So that also falls short of perfection. Why then is it necessary to study them, and how is that knowledge going to benefit us? Is it in order to defeat the proponents of the other doctrines? Well, you would think, yeah, it makes sense. You have to know where they've deviated, and you can defeat them. But Prabhupada says, Srila Prabhupada seemed pleased with my question. No, he explained, our main business is not to defeat others, but to establish the fact that devotion to Krishna consciousness, is the ultimate spiritual goal. This material nature is the perverted reflection of the spiritual reality. We have to understand that whatever is here in this world has its origin in the spiritual world. When in a reflection of a tree we see the green leaves, red flowers, and yellow fruits, we have to understand that they must be there in the real tree. Otherwise, how can they be in the reflection of the tree? Everything is coming from the spiritual sky. Whatever is here in this material nature is also existing in the spiritual reality. The perfect perception is to see things in that light. The Vedas have been designed to reveal the identity of Krishna and bring the living entities to his lotus feet. The 6 branches of Vedic philosophy are actually 6 steps of gradual elevation to understanding the ultimate goal, devotion to Krishna. This is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant. Now he's going to really explain it. The 6 branches of Vedic philosophy. In other words, he's implying that even the false interpretation is progressive. See? So he says, we don't have to defeat them. We just have to understand why they're existing, why there are these 6 darshans. Now he begins. The 6 branches are Purva Mimamsa, preliminary conclusions, or Karma Mimamsa. 1. Now 2. Nyaya, logic. 3. Vaisheshika, atomic theory. 4. Sankhya, analytical studies. 5. Yoga, linking with the Supreme Lord. And 6. Uttara Mimamsa, final conclusions, or Vedanta. Okay. So, first one is Purva Mimamsa, or Karma Mimamsa. And the second, Nyaya. Third, Vaisheshika, or atomic theory. Sankhya, analytical studies. Yoga, linking with the Supreme. And Uttara Mimamsa, or Vedanta, final conclusions. Prabhupada now says, if you simply regard them as independent branches of philosophy and study them without their relation to Krishna, they appear to be atheistic. That's a brilliant statement. If you just study them without understanding their relation to Krishna, you just study them independently, one at a time, they appear to be atheistic. These 6 branches are like rungs on a ladder. The rungs of the ladder by themselves cannot be the real goal. Their actual utility is in relation to the ladder, and the purpose of the ladder is to reach the ultimate height, devotional service to Krishna. This is, again, brilliant statement. He said, don't try and study these darshans individually. You have to see that they're part of a sequence, a progressive sequence leading to pure devotion to Krishna. Even if they're misinterpreted. This is incredible. See? So what's the misinterpretation? They present them as individual, independent darshans or philosophies. Right? But that's not what they're meant to be. So if you understand what they're meant to be, then you don't make the mistake of studying them individually as independent philosophies. They are steps, like rungs on the ladder, to going up to understanding what the goal is pure devotion and love for Krishna. So that's why the goal has to be understood from the beginning. Now, when they teach you all these things in school, do they say what the end result should be? No. They say, well, you can figure it out on your own, right? But that's not the Vedic system. The Vedic system, you begin by saying what the ultimate goal is. And then that way they can see that the different things they study should lead to that ultimate goal of pure devotion and love for Krishna. So it says, the Vedas impart 3 levels of understanding: Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and Bhakti. This is Prabhupada speaking. Initially, one in this material nature wants to enjoy through sense gratification, and the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas give directions on how to enjoy. As you act accordingly, you will get the result. Right action leads to enjoyment, wrong action to suffering. This is called the law of karma, the principle of action and reaction. Okay, now, even the false, let's say, commentators, they at least they say something correct. They're explaining the law of karma, right? And therefore, the false commentators who are not talking about Krishna at all, they say that the ultimate truth is karma. If you only do good karma, you will attain the highest perfection. That's basically what Jaimini was saying. He was one of the biggest proponents of this Purva, the Purva Mimamsa or Karma Mimamsa. Okay? So he does not say the ultimate goal is Krishna or devotional service. He says the ultimate goal is just good acts. And it's a law of nature, so if you just act good, then you will get the result. You will get perfection in life. Okay? That's not true, though. So here's what Prabhupada says. He says, this is called the law of karma, the principle of action and reaction. Therefore, one must know how to act in order to really enjoy, which can lead one to the highest region of the material universe, Satyaloka, where Lord Brahma is situated. However, in spite of all endeavors for enjoyment, one eventually realizes that he cannot avoid suffering. Uninterrupted enjoyment is not possible in this material nature. Suffering comes on its own and is unavoidable. When a person begins to wonder why he is suffering, although he's working only to be happy, he's performing pious activities all the time, trying to avoid impious activities, but still suffering is coming, even in the highest planets. So, it says, when a person begins to wonder why he is suffering and tries to find a way out of it, he comes to Jnanakanda platform. And through 4 branches of Vedic philosophy, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga, he gradually transcends the material world and establishes his connection to the Lord in the heart. This is brilliant. All of a sudden, now, now he's going to explain how he went from Karma Kanda. So he said there's 3 branches. There's Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and Bhakti, right? So if you study the first darshan, Karma Mimamsa, you'll understand that always acting piously will still not solve the problem of suffering, because suffering will come. You will not be able to avoid it. So then you ask the question, why am I suffering? So now these 4 other darshans will answer that question. Even if they're misinterpreted, they'll still answer the question. The misinterpretation is no connection to Krishna. But what they say has some validity to it, even the false interpretations. So he says, through the 4 branches of the next 4 branches of Vedic philosophy, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga, he gradually transcends the material world and establishes connection to the Lord in the heart. So and then he says, through Nyaya, through logic. And the logic is, the supreme truth is neti neti. It's not this and it's not that, because these things are all temporary, right? So it's not the carpet, it's not the granite floor, it's not the table, it's not the altar, it's not the television, it's not the amplifier, it's not the mridanga. So you go through this exhaustive thing, neti, 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 not this, not that, not this, not that. So he says, through Nyaya, he comes to understand that this material world is a place of suffering, dukkhalayam, and that the material body is a perfect instrument for receiving pain. For example, just consider how many ways you can inflict pain on your little finger or on any part of your body, but you will find so few ways to give your finger pleasure, from which we can conclude that this material body is a wonderful instrument for receiving pain. It's brilliant. And it's true. You know, any little false move we make, it could injure our body, right? Like, one false move is trying to get into a brand new Tesla. Have you ever tried to get into the passenger side of a Tesla? It's very difficult. It's very tight. You know, imagine some 6 foot I had difficulty getting in and out. Imagine a 6 foot person or a 6'8" person trying to get in and out. So it's very, very, very tight. So that's why you like American cars before with these big cars, you know, a lot of room. You know, now cars, they get smaller and smaller, and it's harder for big people to get in. How about if a guy's really fat? You know, the Tesla, the most expensive Tesla, is very difficult to get in and out in the front seats. Okay, so for example, okay, so thereafter one begins to consider this material nature really is, and through the Vaisheshika branch of philosophy, he realizes that the perceivable material world is actually composed of the minutest particles called paramanu, or atoms. But to our senses, it takes various shapes, forms, and perceptions. In other words, what appears to our senses to be real is not actually real. This microphone is made of atoms. And when you get down to the atomic level, things are moving, but it doesn't look like it's moving, right? But if you let it disintegrate, then it'll break down into atoms, and you don't see the thing anymore. So, in other words, it's illusory. It's an illusory thing. It has temporary existence, but eventually it disappears. You know, it'll break down. The rug will break down. The microphone will break down. The television will break down. It takes time, but eventually it breaks down into atoms, and atoms are moving all the time. So the atoms are moving in this microphone right now. Right? But we don't perceive it because it's on the atomic level. But over time, you'll see there's one scratch here, and this part is getting a little loose, and that part is coming loose. You know, eventually something falls off, and so it is moving, but very slowly, and our eyes can't catch it. But if you put a microscope, you won't see the atoms, but you would see the molecules. You can see the molecules, and they are also moving somewhat. Right? Okay, so this leads to the next branch of Vedic philosophy. So therefore, this material nature is illusory. So when you get to the atomic theory of Vaisheshika or Kannada, first there's the logic, and through the logic, you eventually understand that pain and suffering are not, you cannot escape from it. The body is made for pain and suffering. So then the next thing is the atomic theory of Vaisheshika and Kannada. And you realize that actually what appears to our senses to be real is not actually real. Therefore, this material nature is an illusion. Because all these things are made of tiny, less than microscopic atoms that you can't see, but they can tell that the atoms are moving all the time. And then when this breaks down to the atomic level, you don't see it anymore. This leads to the next branch of Vedic philosophy called Sankhya, or analytical study, which describes the material nature consisting of 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And the individual with 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. The senses interact with the elements, and 5 objects of the senses are generated: the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin, and eyes. So it says, the ears interact with ether and sound is produced. The skin interacts with air and touch is produced. The eyes interact with fire and form is produced. The tongue interacts with water and taste is produced. And the nose interacts with earth and smell is produced. This is brilliant. These are called the ton mantras, the effects of the senses. So the eyes can see, right? The ears can hear, the tongue can taste, the skin can feel. And so these are all different perceptions. So those perceptions, they're called ton mantras. What appears to our sense, so it says, the senses interact with elements and the 5 objects of the senses are generated. The ears interact with ether and sound is produced. The skin interacts with air and touch is produced. The eyes interact with fire and form is produced. The tongue interacts with water and taste is produced. And the nose interacts with earth and smell is produced. There are also 5 working senses with which we become active in this world, namely the hands, legs, voice, anus, and genitals. In this way, Sankhya philosophy determines 20 tattvas, or aspects of material nature, and then considers 3 subtle elements beyond that. See, so that's why we say the brain is not the mind, because the mind is something subtle. You can't actually see it, but it's existing. Right? The brain you can see. That's why when they and started studying it, they saw a few little, some little differences to a normal brain, but they still didn't understand how he became so intelligent. Because the mind is different than the brain. Okay, so then the subtle elements beyond that, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, and subsequently the Mahat Tattva, the total material energy from which the entire creation became manifest. Through these 24 manifestations, Sankhya philosophy analyzes the entire material nature. However, it concludes that these 24 manifestations are objective in nature and cannot exist without the subject. So there's a subject and object, right? So they're just objects. They're not the subject. The I, the self, or the soul, is the subject. Because without the soul, these other things won't be functional. It's just like without the battery in your cell phone, although the cell phone is there, everything is in working order, but it won't work without the battery. You take the battery out, it doesn't work. So you take the soul out of the body, it doesn't work anymore. It disintegrates. You put the soul into the body is a little fish that connects with an ovum, and then it develops a whole body, right? Heads, legs, everything. But if the soul goes out, that everything disintegrates again. So it says, however, it concludes that these 24 manifestations are objective in nature and cannot exist without the subject, the I, the self, the soul. The entire material nature has been analyzed, but the soul cannot be found there. Therefore, it comes from another reality, the spiritual nature, and has its origin, its source in the Supreme Soul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, Sankhya philosophy takes one to the spiritual reality and transcends the material nature. Even the false Sankhya will bring you to this realization. Okay. Recognition of the fact that the soul is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead leads to the final aspect of Jnana Kanda, the second part of progressive knowledge, called yoga. Yoga is the process by which the spirit soul becomes connected to the super soul, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This process has 8 different stages, or limbs. Therefore, it is called Astanga Yoga. Asta means 8, right? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dharana, and Samadhi. In the final stage, Samadhi, one perceives the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in one's heart. Recognizing one's minuteness and the greatness of the Supreme Lord, one's head automatically bends down in respect and one surrenders to Him. This is brilliant, right? You can preach to anyone with this, even scientists. This is scientific. The last one is Vedanta. But before Vedanta, you have the Ashtanga Yoga. It's part of Jnana Yoga has 4 sections to it, right? So you have the Nyaya, logic. Then you have Vaisesika, which is atomic, right? Then you have Sankhya, the analytical study of the 24 elements. And then you have the yoga, and no, the 24 elements, right? And then one thing is missing, the soul. So that you understand through yoga. And then you come to Vedanta, where you understand the soul's relationship to Paramatma, or Krishna.
So in the Uttara Mimamsa, where that's the 5th one, right? So
Okay. Now you have Vedanta is Uttara Mimamsa, yes. And the first one is Purva Mimamsa, preliminary conclusions, and Uttara Mimamsa, final conclusions, or Vedanta. And the yoga links you with the Lord.
So the Uttara Mimamsa and Vedanta is the same?
No, Purva Mimamsa is the first darshan.
Yeah.
It's also called Karma Mimamsa.
Correct. But Uttara Mimamsa?
Uttara Mimamsa is Vedanta, the last stage. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I can go stop right there and continue this tomorrow. There's still more. Any questions?
No, this is amazing. This explanation.
Yeah.
How step by step.
Even the false explanation will be progressive understanding. Because eventually it's going to come. That's why it says Bahunam Janmanamante. After many, many births and deaths of speculation, one comes to the conclusion, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Haribol. This is how you preach to highly intelligent people. This is completely rational and scientific. And you're not ready to defeat anyone. You're ready to help them progress, even through false interpretations, to the absolute truth. It's brilliant. It's unbelievable what Prabhupada just explained. We have to thank Bhakti Churu for asking that question and noting down the answer. Haribol. Hare Krishna. You want to sing, Prabhu? No? Yes? No? Huh? Oh, you,
I had a job in New York City.
oh, you don't want to take that job. It's too far away.
Yeah, they gave me a start in January in prison.
You can't find a job here.